Na špatném místě byla. Na špatném místě.
Takže svítilo jako takový nástroj.
Tohle byla přece pomsta, že jo?
Hello and welcome to Factual Animation Film Festival 2020. My name is Alex Widdowson. I'm the festival programmer. I'll be joined today with Anna Benner, and we'll be talking about All Her Dying Lovers, which was co-direct with Elinette Zoe Ayanda. So before we start the interview, I just want to remind everybody that tickets are available for the festival, the screening of the actual films. They'll be released on the 17th of October 2020 and available for a week. If you follow the link below, you can buy yourself. So, Anna, can we have a little quick discussion about how the project first came about, the sort of context behind its creation?
Sure, we should definitely do that. So the strangest thing probably about this in terms of where it came from is that we made another film about the same story before. So this is already the second film we made about this crazy urban legend about sex and syphilis and murder. Initially, we won a pitch to do a 20-minute documentary film, which we had part animation in it already, and so out of that came the animation film. And if I now rewind back to the story, because before the pitch, of course, we had to find the actual material, which was something that Zoe, my co-director, did. So she's the one with a very strong background in Eastern European culture, languages, etc. She studied it in college, and she lives in Prague currently, not for very long, a couple of days, and then she's moving to Serbia. Anyway, she found the story because she was keeping up with like the news, what's happening in the region, what's happening in the Czech Republic in particular, and just stumbled across this weird little story a few years ago and thought that would make a great film. And then she took it to not 100% sure if it's the right thing, but there was some kind of development lab at the Scottish Film Institute or something like that. I'm not 100% sure on the details, unfortunately. And she asked me if I felt like developing with her, because she felt that the story needed animation. And I was like, yes, of course, I would love to. So that's how we started kicking about this project some years ago, and then it became one film, and then it became another film, and it might become another film. We're not really sure, but maybe we just keep making films about it.
So we are essentially talking about an urban legend, and this is a documentary about a possible fiction using animation rather than live action. So there's all these relationships between truth and fiction, authenticity and creations. How were you guys sort of organizing that in your own thoughts as you were making the film?
Like when we were talking to people about it, everybody was always very obsessed with whether it was true or not. But for both Zoe and me, that was never really the point of it. So our intention was not proving the story or disproving it. It was about how are people talking about things? How are people remembering women in particular, but history? Like what else is there? It's about layering things rather than definitively saying this is one particular truth and that's the only one worth telling. So in a way, this is kind of at the heart of the film, which is also about the story and how people are telling the story rather than just the legend itself. So I always like to describe it as sort of a gossipy way of remembering history. Kind of everybody puts in their own little idea of what could have happened, maybe.
So what do you think it does say? If it is a mythology, or we don't know if it's a fantasy or not, what does it say about that culture?
Well, I think
culture in general.
What was important to us is mostly what it says about how we remember women and how we think about women in history, women in wartime, that particular part of history, and what we think they could have done or could not have done. Were they, like, is this a heroic act or not? Like, somehow in the news it was often presented as a very heroic act. So we don't think it is so much, but you know, we can leave that to the viewers to decide. So it's more about attitudes, if kind of past and present. So it's about, what are people thinking women can or would do now? What did they do in the past?
It's, maybe it functions as a sort of cautionary tale for men, as well as a sort of heroic story for women. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
But certainly the
think,
ethics are ambiguous.
I mean, I don't think it really says if you rape someone, they will give someone syphilis. I don't think that is really the moral of the tale. But it's kind of, yeah, it's more about how we, like, really how we think about these kind of stories. And there, maybe this story isn't true, but there are a ton of stories from the Second World War and other war and conflict periods that are true, that have sort of similar elements, you know. So this is kind of what we wanted to highlight in the film.
So the relationship between you and your colleague, you were the animator, is that right?
Yeah, so Zoe is more on she comes from the documentary side, from documentary visual anthropology, whereas I'm from the animation side. So we kind of work together really well. We complement each other nicely with our skills and also with that. And then luckily we do share interests in similar stories, so we work together nicely. But yeah, I did all the visual development and the animation, and yeah, basically the pictures are me and the story we worked on together. But Zoe, for example, she went out there and did the interviews and found the people and all that. So that's kind of how we work together in this project.
And do you mind talking a little bit about the techniques that you use in animation?
Sure. I like using rotoscoping. I don't know if everybody knows what that means. It's basically using video footage and drawing over each frame to create the movement and then getting rid of the video. A lot of animators do not like this technique, or they look down on it because it's not real animation, which I agree with to a certain extent. I think it does. It's not the same as coming up with motion from scratch, but for me and for this film and these kind of films in particular, I really like it because I feel like this kind of technique gives us very, very human motion, sort of very realistic and kind of also both more strong and more subtle movement and expression, because we don't just go for the very big animated movements. In animation, you always want to kind of exaggerate everything a little bit, but we get the very kind of the in-between things, the sort of incidental ways a finger moves or hair moves or boobs move or whatever. So for me, this technique kind of gets nicely close to the actual person. I mean, we cast an actress, we cast the lovely Leo Bagruno in the role of the woman who did an amazing job with me when we did the filming. And she was really game to just like push it through and just go really quite vulnerable and close. And then I spent some months drawing over every frame over and over and over again to create this.
Well, a lot of us know what that feels like.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the debate over rotoscoping comes up a lot, and it's often raised by the rotoscoping artists. And there's this feeling like they're going to be attacked at any minute by a traditional animator. But I think you know, now it's so, I mean, you speak to any animator, they use animation reference materials sometimes, video footage, even photographs. I often use photographs outside of like maybe screenshots from a reference. But I mean, the sort of slippery slope from authenticity to inauthenticity just goes to show how there's just many ways of doing things. And I think it's totally unfair to disregard a whole medium, a sort of subgenre of animation.
That's very true. Maybe I'm being a bit too defensive about it.
Well,
but I have had to justify it a few times. No, I know you weren't. You were kind of jumping my age, chivalrously. Very nice, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it comes up a lot at our festival, I think, because sometimes we are dealing with actual footage of people, and these documentaries, we have reference material to work from, so maybe that's why it's quite common. And maybe also there is something about that authenticity, that sort of naturalistic movement that lends itself to rotoscoping.
Yeah, I think it works really well for documentary type animation, for sure. Even like either to obscure people, if you have like actual subject but they don't want to be on camera, then it can be a fantastic tool. Or yeah, to use it the way we did it for a recreation that feels kind of human. I think it has that bit of humanity that, of course, other animation can have as well, but it just kind of the way the movement works is I think we connect to it in a different way. So it might be useful, but animation has so many forms and it can work in so many ways and on so many levels, and a lot of it can work beautifully for documentary as well.
I often wonder of the influence of Uri and Michelle Crenot in Denmark. They've worked a lot with rotoscoping in various forms, and they're incredibly influential in the European animated documentary scene.
For sure.
So I wonder if they've actually spread their influence across the scene over here. I'm not sure, but certainly, I mean, you think of the feature films that have been made in animated documentary as a genre. A lot of them do use a lot of video reference or direct rotoscoping. So there's something happening there.
Cool.
All right, well, Anna, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Before we go, I'm going to remind everybody that the festival starts on the 17th of October 2020. There's a link below this video if you would like to buy a ticket, and I hope to see you all there. All right. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Alex.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.